What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Other Guys on the Badlands Podcast Network. I'm Jake, joined by Paul. To quote a great philosopher, our expectations were low, but holy fuck. The New York Jets season is over, basically, after a miserable defeat by the worst team in football. I don't even know if I can call them the worst team in football anymore, but the Jets lost to the Patriots, failed to sweep them yet again in what should have been a cakewalk win. Uh, Paul, what were your thoughts coming out of that game? That was fucking miserable.
Yeah, it's brutal. I don't know if there's anybody in the Jets universe who could have seen 2-6 coming. I think some people were more positive and bullish than other people, and some people were trying to keep it medium at 9-8 of a prediction. But I don't think anybody outside of the coldest Jets hater on the internet streets could have predicted a 2-6 start. And like going into that game yesterday, I was sitting on my couch like probably 12:45 right before the games were about to start, and my wife asked me like, "Is there any like real risk today? Like, is anybody actually worried about the outcome of today's game?" And I've like. This is the person I love most in the world outside my children. And I wanted to lash out at her. I was like, are you new here? Like, of course there's something to worry about today. And of course it came true. And, I just like, I can't I can't say anything that hasn't already been said either by Joe and Connor or in the comment section of just like it's not even anger really anymore. It's just complete like disbelief and apathy. It's one of those things where you can't believe it, but at the same time, it's the most believable thing out there because this organization just can't seem to get out of its own way. It's the same thing over and over again. And, we're left here and now we have a short week turnaround. And like, honestly, man, like I feel like they come out of this and they probably beat the Texans on Thursday because that's the maximum amount of pain that we can be in. The other thing I'll say is like, I texted you at some point near the end of the game. I don't even really remember when it was, but basically like for the first time ever in my life, at the end of that game, I was like, okay, I want them to lose. Like I want this to go the wrong way at this point and I've been so avidly against tanking in the past. And I've explained that I think last week where I said like in the past, it was like there was too much like young collateral to just piss it all away and root for losses. But I was so angry and, borderline getting to the point of not caring anymore during that game, watching them just make the same mistakes against the Patriots again, where I was like, you know what? I hope they lose this one. And I kind of feel like that moving forward. Like I'm kind of team tear it down at this point. And we'll get into like what that looks like and what that means. Obviously, everybody now is talking about head coaches and GMs and different things like that. And I'm almost kind of like, this is like full tear down to the studs. Everything must go. I can't. I want it all gone. I can't do it anymore.
Yeah. I think, well, first of all, the Jets are absolutely going to beat the Texans because I bet on the Texans to win that game as soon as I saw that the Jets were favored, which blew my fucking mind. So my money being on the Texans is a sure enough thing to guarantee that win for the Jets. But, I think after yesterday, it's so frustrating because there were so many things that led to that loss that any Jets fan who's watched any amount of football, let alone, people who listen to this podcast, especially the true, like, cannot say enough how much we love the people who are listening to this podcast the day after that loss. But, anyone in their right mind who has watched Jets football, especially over the last 3 games, is like, you can't rely on the kicker. Jets ended up losing a 4-point swing because of the kicker. The fact that we were like, I think we can run on this team and then found success running it and abandon it to the point where Brees Hall had like 10 touches in the third quarter is insane. And it seems like for as much as the Jets listen to fans, and Joe made this point last night about like the Jets give coaches long leashes and they cave to public pressure and all this stuff. It seems like they listen to fans in all these different areas, but the simplest fix on the field they can't even fucking get right.
Yeah, it's crazy, dude. And somebody tallied it all up differently. Like you said, 4-point swing. Somebody else on Twitter had it at an 11-point difference because of the two punts inside the 40-yard line where you can't trust your kicker at this point, so you have to punt in those scenarios. I would argue that you don't have to punt. I would have rather gone for it against the
Sure.
Patriots offense that was really doing nothing, and I also would have gone for it, 4th and 1 inside the 10-yard line at that point also. But like it's an 11-point swing. It's Joe and Connor said it last night. It's almost like Greg the Leg is you know the savior in a
Yeah.
sense because he's forcing the bottom out. Like he's bringing the Jets closer to the bottom rather than allowing them, because the team isn't good. I mean, there's something wrong. I can't put my finger on it. The easiest way to put it is just coaching. Like coaching is so much more important than I think anybody could have realized, right? It was always, can Aaron Rodgers help get over the coaching? But it's obvious now that it's so bad and it's so endemic that like nothing is going to help it. And uh, to your point about not being able to just make the easy layup, like, okay, great, you got Hassan Reddick in the building. He looked not great, by the way, which is to be expected. He hasn't played at all, and he's not in football shape. So like your GM can get that done and he can swing a trade for Devontae Adams, but you couldn't call Brandon McManus when he was still available, or you couldn't call the other guy, the other idiot that's available that used to be on the Jets, whose name I can't even remember. Like you couldn't do that. You couldn't get the low hanging fruit on the kicker, and you're going to continue to say we stick by Greg, even though it's obvious that there's something wrong with his head at this point and he just doesn't have it anymore. But you can do all this other stuff. It just doesn't make sense, man. It's just so typical Jets.
And it's like to your point, you're making trades for Devontae Adams, like you're working. Like I know Joe says JD has essentially been off the clock, which is funny, but they made a premier trade a week ago, like, or 2 weeks ago. And it's crazy to see how much the bottom has fallen out. And you said it last week, like every time we think we get to the bottom, there's a trap door. And I'm like, well, at least we're finally rock bottom. Fucking trap door again. You lose to the
Mm-hmm.
Patriots. And so,
And by the
and
way, this isn't the bottom. Everybody's saying this is the bottom now. It's not. It can get worse.
yeah. So, you have finally joined the pro tank ranks, which I truly never thought I would see. Like being not pro tank in 2020 and or 2021 and being pro tank now shows you how much this team has ruined your loyalty, your expectations, but it fully makes sense simply because of the position the team is in. Like we don't have assets. We'll get to how to get more later in the podcast, but like we are not an attractive job. And we have a head coach opening. We have, I assume, a GM opening coming up, and we're just not an attractive job. So the one thing you can do as a fan to root for the job to be more attractive is for the team to fucking suck this year and get the highest pick possible. No matter if it's, for a Rodgers successor or whatever, like if you have the second pick or the first pick or whatever and avenues, that could be enticing to a coach, a GM who isn't necessarily going to get those opportunities. But as we all know, the reality of the NFL is that these guys aren't going to go out there and suck on purpose. Like
Right.
tanking happens from like a roster construction standpoint and things like that, but the players are going to go out and give their all on the field. Jeff Ulbrich, who ostensibly wants another chance at a head coaching job at some point in the future, is going to try and put together a good game plan. Like these guys are going to try. So with that being said, what are your expectations for this team for the rest of the season? Do you think there is a time where we see Tyrod, or is that not even an option with Aaron Rodgers still having pull?
I don't think Tyrod helps the tank. I think Tyrod probably makes the tank more challenging at this point.
Well, I agree, but so with I guess I might have teed that up wrong, but like with the process in mind being that everyone in the building is going to go out there and try and win. Do you think Ulbrich pulls Rodgers, or is it just we have Aaron Rodgers, we're going to live and die by him, and like that is what it is. There's nothing to do there, or we'll try and make changes in other areas.
These are all such interesting questions because it's like, do I think Ulbrich might want to and think about pulling Rodgers at some point? Yeah. Does he have the cachet to do it? I don't know. Like I don't know. Like he has to weigh at some point his desire to be a head coach in the future against NFL relationships and what does it look like if I do this, and remember what happened to Ben McAdoo when he pulled Eli for Geno, which was the right decision at that point for the Giants. It was the right thing to do to win games that season. But Ben McAdoo was crucified, right? Like, and he hasn't been head coach again. And so like the questions about this are more complicated than like should he do it, right? Like I don't even know how you balance all that if you're Jeff Ulbrich. I think that there's a way to answer this question, which is like, what do I want to see? And there's a way to answer this question of what do I expect to see? What do I expect to see? I expect to see them continue to putter along and make very few changes and kind of just run this thing into the ground until the end of the season. And they'll probably win a few more games. They'll probably end up in the middle of the draft order somewhere. But this is a bad team that isn't going anywhere. And I think once the offseason hits, then kind of the action starts. What do I want to see? I want to see the opposite of that. I would like to see Joe D go this week. I don't think it happens, but I'd love to see it like pretty much right after the Texans game, because I don't think there's any point in waiting till the offseason to start the rebuild, which then would indicate to me that they're not planning on rebuilding. They're planning on giving this thing one more shot with Aaron Rodgers in some fucked up Frankenstein version of the Jets that doesn't look like the Jets anymore, with like a coach that you're going to slide in for a 1-year deal and like maybe a GM who Rodgers handpicks. Like that to me is like the disaster scenario of how this could play out, is just like continue to try when it's obviously not working and then take another run at it next year with a group of guys who like really don't know what the future looks like, don't know if they're a part of it or not. And they're trying to make Aaron Rodgers happy and they're trying to make Woody Johnson happy. But I could see the Jets going down that road. I think the much more fruitful endeavor would be to start it now and start the fire sale and start ripping Band-Aids off and start, shipping people out of here, whether it be by fire or by trade or whatever the case may be, and like strip it down to its barest bones. The problem with that theory is that you now have to find patsies for next year who are willing to take the ride that is going to be unenjoyable, right? Because in that scenario, if you start jettisoning players, right, and you peel off the GM and you let Ulbrich just kind of like run this thing to the end of the year, now you have to find somebody next year who's willing to come in with potentially like Jameis Winston at quarterback, or like, do you like go with Jacoby Brissett or Taylor Heineke or Drew Lock or Andy Dalton? Or do you like go grab Trey Lance in free agency and be like, well, best case scenario, he stinks and we have the number 1 overall pick next year. Or, other scenario is like, maybe he's actually good and we figure out that we got a quarterback on the cheap, right? So like, there's so many different ways that this can spray out in so many different directions. And I don't think it's so easy to say that they can tank from an organizational level because of all those things. Like, you need to find patsies for next year who are just going to lay down and let this thing happen. And I don't think it goes that easy. And so I think because of all those weird, uncertain questions, what you're going to find is that the Jets are just going to continue to trot down this road of mediocrity, and that they're going to take one more shot at it again next year. And it's probably not going to work. And then like the rebuild will start after that. But then to your point, we're in a bad spot because this is an unattractive job with no assets, with nothing to build a future with. And you're just kind of left in no man's land at this point. So like, I would love to see them do something bold and start doing crazy, crazy things immediately, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, the real ideal scenario with this team and everything that's happened so far this season is that we're sellers at the deadline, especially with players like DJ Reed, I believe, is coming up on a contract year, who would be very valuable to a contender. And it's not like if we say, all right, we're going to let Joe Douglas figure out the rest of the year and then we'll start over with a new GM once his contract's up, like, you've missed your window for trading a player like that because he's hit the open market and now you've just lost him for nothing. The flip side of that coin, and the reason why we're really fucked, is like Joe Douglas has no incentive to trade away pieces that can get wins now in favor of future assets. Because if he does that, he knows he's not the guy who's going to be dealing with those future assets. So from an in-season perspective, like, we are really fucked, and I just hope that with the current roster construction, we lose as many games as possible. But what I want to flip to is